Good afternoon, dear viewers. Today, we have the third meeting devoted to one topic, the relay race of civilization. So, at previous meetings, we have considered what kind of animals such civilizations are, and what happens to them, how they are born, develop, die, how many years it happens, what happens to him at the third stage, at the middle, at the late stage. Today, we are going to consider the third topic, dedicated to civilizations. This is their interaction of civilizations. We will now highlight only three forms. This is a clash, that is, wars, symbiosis, that is, interaction and mutual assistance, and a relay race. Relay race, something that is passed on the baton from one civilization to another. We recall that Huntington in the 1970s wrote a book called The Clash of Civilization. He did not write about symbiosis or about the relay race. He highlighted only the conflicting part of this process. Well, probably because he is a Westerner after all. All wars come from the West. We know this well, yes. That's why he talks about collisions. But the collision does happen. Huntington predicted that future world bloody conflicts are conflicts between civilizations. This is his forecast. He gave it 50 years before the start of these bloody clashes, including in Ukraine. Here is such a Huntington. He is so depicted as a caricature of a cartoon, that here he writes about the concept of collisions of civilization. Were there any collisions? Maybe Huntington's making it up. Let's take a look. Let's start with the recent past, but relatively recent. Then we will go even deeper. Western civilization, 11 crusades to the Arab world, 11 crusades. Armed wars to the teeth in those days. 11 times they went to conquer the Grail Cup there. I do not know what they wanted, to conquer the Ark, but one way or another. The Holy Sepulchre. But one way or another, it was a military invasion of Islamic civilization. Ancient civilization, what was it better? No, the campaign of Alexander the Great, who captured North Africa gradually, and even went. Well, I'm not talking about Central Asia, there's this whole world. He reached, in my opinion, well, he definitely reached India. He didn't reach China, in my opinion. Hiking. Let's look at Mezdurakenskaya and Syria. Here is a map of their campaigns. To Egypt, please, we went there, we went here. That is, every civilization has made hikes in one way or another. The Mesopotamian civilization went on military campaigns against the Egyptian civilization 6 times. And each time, they almost never reached it, because a Jew got in their way and lay down with his bones. The Jewish state was an outpost of Egyptian civilization. And although many Jews, the people said, fuck it, we need to fight for this Egypt, let's still surrender. But the kings of the Jews stood their ground and repelled this invasion. Why? The wives of the kings of Judah were daughters and pharaohs, and they whispered in their beds at night what to do. In other words, there was a tricky control system. This is a separate topic, but 6 hikes. She, yes, share. Well, Shursh, by the way, how these same Munches conquered China. There is also a Shurshelif to look for. This is not a separate story. The Great Wall of China, which stood there for several centuries, did not play any role because there is a church La Femme. And the gates opened, and the Bonjers passed through this wall without any resistance. There was a question about one woman only. The same ancient Egypt, he was no better. He went there in the same way, to Sinai, to Palestine, Syria. Wherever he could, he went there. Military campaigns to all civilizations are no exception to the rules. As for our civilization, the Russian civilization, we have experienced a lot of invasions from Turkey, and from the Tatar-Mongol invasion. But as for the West, there have been campaigns, starting with the ice battle, and ending with the last campaign of the Great Patriotic War, the Second World War, and now another one the campaign has begun.
Великой Отечественной войны, Вторая мировая война. А сейчас еще один поход начался.
I found the Soviet line here. There is a line that connects all the capitals, it turns out, of this territory. St. Petersburg, Moscow, the old barn, the new barn. If you draw it, then it clearly passes through Moscow. So no Western campaign has crossed this line. The ice battle did not work out. The invasion of Mamae did not work out. Napoleon reached Moscow, fought back. During the Great Patriotic War, they reached St. Petersburg. They did not go further. They reached Moscow. They could not go further. They reached Stalingrad. They could not go further. This is some kind of mystical line, the last frontier of our Russian civilization, through which no Western invasion has passed so far. This is the last trench. I hope that this time NATO will not reach this line. We will try, but if it comes, it will be thrown back. What's going on now? Russia's friendship with the European Union, which seemed to us to be a high-pi, eternal and indestructible, suddenly unexpectedly turned into a confrontation in the 14th year, which now ends with the division of the world into two parts. Part of the Western world goes west, and Ukraine is just on the break, and part of our world goes east towards India and China. The West is fighting for, it is clear that we have only explored natural reserves of $135 trillion. These are only proven reserves. Undiscovered reserves are 10 times more according to some estimates. And the US national debt, $35 billion trillion. That is, if they conquer our territory, change the administration here, and use all the resources to pay off their debts. Then we remain here in general naked, undressed, barefoot, like Indians in their time. All our wealth goes to the West. This is what the battle is about. It must be understood perfectly. And I want to say that no civilization has ever lived peacefully with neighbors, and there has always been a confrontation. Confrontation was confrontation, but there were periods of not confrontation, but interaction, assistance, symbiosis. I call it the symbiosis of civilization. All civilizations share their achievements of humanity with each other in peacetime. That is, we are not always at war with each other. Civilizations are not always at war. Well, for example, it should be clearly understood that it was the West that created industry in Japan, India, and China. Well, who would doubt it? Technology, factories, money, everything came from there. It was the West that made the Arab world rich, at least the sheiks. Why? Because with this oil production, there is gas production. It was built by Western specialists, using Western technology. It is the West that is helping to develop industrially in Latin America now. It was the West that created industry in Russia, starting with Ivan III. Here I foresee a lot of all kinds of protests, questions, somehow we ourselves developed our industry. Here I have made a separate report on this topic. I can repeat this report again, sort out how the West created our industry by shelves, by stages, by centuries. Here is a short digression into this topic. 500 years of industrialization of Russia from the Assumption Cathedral to the deeper river. The Assumption Cathedral was built thanks to Western technologies, brick firing technologies and construction. Before that, it didn't work out. Deproges and, in general, the entire industrialization is primarily the merit of the Western technological world. Just one short but vivid example, Albert Kahn. He is called in certain circles the father of industrialization in the USSR. Who is this guy? He was born in Germany to a Jewish family. He was the eldest son of a rabbi in the city of Ronin. Emigrated with his parents to the USA in 1880, designed and built Ford factories in the USA. In 1928th year, he was invited to the USSR to participate in industrialization. He came to Moscow with 25 engineers, and within 2 years trained more than 4,000 years of 4,000 specialists. Between the 29th and 32nd years, he designed and organized the construction of 520 from one object. 521 American Jews with 25 engineers managed to organize industrialization for us. We need to take off our hat and say thank you for this industrialization to both the West and the great leader of a great people. But you have to pay for
За все
everything,
надо платить.
for the fact
За
that
то, что нам все
technologies,
время завозили,
factories,
начиная
and
там с Ивана
specialists were
III,
brought to us all the
технологии,
time,
заводы,
starting with Ivan
специалистов.
III.
Это мы
We can
можем
consider this
рассмотреть отдельно,
separately,
там,
sequentially, and so
и так
on.
далее.
I can talk about specific
Я могу
examples
на эту
for a
тему
long
долго
time on this
рассказывать,
topic.
конкретных
You
примеров.
have to pay
За что
for
мы платили?
everything.
Чем мы платили?
What did you pay with?
Более
A
молодая
younger
цивилизация
civilization pays, excuse me, to
извините,
them, the elderly, with
старикам
its
своим
body,
телом,
that is, with
то
resources.
есть ресурсами.
As young
Так
women
молодые
pay
женщины
young rich
платят своим
old men
телом
with their
молодым,
bodies, so,
богатым старикам,
unfortunately, it has
так, к
been with us
сожалению,
for
это
all
было
500 years, even
с
thousands of
нами на
years.
протяжении всех 500 лет, а то и 1000
No,
лет,
the
и
last
500 лет
500
последних.
years.
И
And
также
so it
было с
was
самой
with
Западной
westernmost Europe.
Европой.
Western
Западная
Europe
Европа
settled with the Roman
рассчитывалась с
Empire, amber,
Римской империей,
forest products, and other things, in
янтарем,
kind, that is, natural
лесными
resources.
продуктами там, и прочими вещами, натурой. То есть
What
природными
could they give to
богатствами.
the
Ничего
great
не могли
Roman
дать
Empire?
Великой Римской империи.
Nothing.
Ничего.
It
Это
was
потом
then
они
that they
стали
became a
великой
great industrial
индустриальной
civilization.
цивилизацией. И
And
нам
we
еще
have yet
предстоит
to
стать
become a
великой
great information and energy
информационно-энергетической
civilization.
цивилизацией.
That's when
Тогда
we
мы
stop paying
перестанем
with our
расплачиваться
resources.
нашими, так сказать, ресурсами.
But
Но
here is Russia's export
вот
of
вам
basic
экспорт
goods in the
России основных товаров
2017th
в
year.
2017
You
году.
see, the
Вот
blue one
видите,
is what?
синее это что?
These
Это
are
продукция
products of the fuel and energy
топливно-энергетического
complex.
комплекса.
Next. Fertilizer
Дальше,
is also
удобрения. Это
practically a
тоже
raw
практически
material.
сырье.
Timber
Лесоматериалы
is
это
raw
сырье.
materials,
Металлы и изделия
metals,
из них.
products made from
Машины и
them.
оборудование тут
Machinery here
составляют
makes up
какую-то
some scanty
мизерную
share.
долю.
What
Что
are
такое
metals
металлы
and
и
products
изделия
made
из
of them?
них? Ну, это
Well, it's a
прокат,
rental,
на самом
actually.
деле.
It's
Это
not
не
cars,
автомашины,
it's not ships, it's
это
not
не
anything.
корабли,
It's
не
just a
какие-то
rental.
там,
In
ничего,
other
просто
words,
прокат. То есть
we
мы
are still paying
расплачиваемся
with
до сих пор
resources for these
ресурсами
very
за
ones.
вот эти вот
It's a
самые, это
symbiosis.
симбиоз.
They give
Они
us
нам дают
factories,
заводы,
they give us
они
modern
дают технологии
technologies, we give
современные,
them
мы им
raw
даем сырье.
materials. We have
У
nothing
нас
else.
другого нет. Ничего.
Unfortunately,
Другого
we
дать не
can't give you
можем, к
anything
сожалению.
else.
Был
There was a
короткий
short
период,
period, starting
начиная
from
с
somewhere in the
где-то
70s,
70-х,
50s,
50-х,
60s,
60-х,
70s,
70-х годов,
when we
когда
still
у
had a
нас был
product that was
все-таки
valued there in the
товар,
West, but
которым
not in the West,
ценился там на
or rather
Западе,
all
но не
over
на
the
Западе,
world.
точнее во всем
There
мире,
are
там наши
tractors of
трактора
Belarus were
Беларуси
valued.
ценились, там
There's some of our products.
некоторые наши
Machines
изделия,
were
станки
supplied to China,
поставлялись в
and
Китай
so
и так
on.
далее, но только
But not
не
to
в
Switzerland,
Швейцарию,
at
по
least.
крайней мере.
I know this
Я это
why.
знаю почему,
Because
потому
my
что мои
products, which I
продукты,
produce at
которые
my
я
small
произвожу на
enterprise,
небольшом
we have
своем
been
предприятии, мы
exporting since the
экспортируем с
95th year
95-го
to
года
countries such as
в такие
Austria
страны, как
and
Австрия,
Switzerland
Швейцария,
and
Германия.
Germany. In other
То есть мы
words, we
производим по
produce
уникальной
tools using a
технологии
unique
инструменты,
technology
которые нас
that are
покупают
bought by the leading
ведущие
industrial countries of the
промышленные
world.
страны мира. Почему?
Why?
Потому что наши
Because our
инструменты
tools are
лучше
better
их
than them on the order,
на порядке.
and they have been
И они
buying
у нас
from us
покупают
since the
уже с
95th
95-го
year
года на
on a
постоянной
permanent
основе.
basis. Yes,
Да, мы
we can
можем иногда
sometimes show
показать
some
чудо
kind of
какое-то,
miracle.
там ледоколы,
There are
какие-то космические
icebreakers, some
корабли,
spaceships,
какие-то
some
особые
special
ракеты, к
rockets,
примеру,
for
там вот
example.
наши инструменты
There are our
маленькие,
tools, a
пример.
small example.
Но в
But in the
совокупности
aggregate
всех
of all
технологических
technological
вещей мы все равно
things,
так или
we are
иначе
still somehow
являемся
secondary
вторичным
to the Western
для
industrial world.
для западного индустриального мира.
Moreover,
Более того,
our
наши
calculations with them
расчеты
were
с ними
going on.
пошли,
The natural product was changing.
менялся, так сказать,
So
натуральный
it all
продукт.
started with the servants of
Началось
this
с
girl
щели, где-то
and the
девушки
gifts of the
дары
forest.
леса.
This
Это
is
киевская
Keith,
Русь.
Russia.
Потом
Then
меха и
furs
дары
and gifts of the
леса.
forest.
Потом
Then hemp
пенька и
and
лен.
flax. Already the servants
Уже
were not
чудик не подставляли,
substituted
потому
because
что
Christianity
христианство
forbade
запрещало
trading.
торговать.
Before
До
Christian
христианской
Russia,
Руси
work and trade were in full
торговля шла
swing.
вовсю.
Well, you know
Ну,
Prince Vladimir,
вы
who
знаете
baptized.
князя Владимира,
He had
который
500
крестил, у него
wives
там
there,
500 жен
didn't
было,
he?
по-моему, да?
And that's it.
Всё.
Well,
Да,
yes,
то есть
there
это
was something
нормально
normal there,
считалось там,
that a
что
girl
там
from the village
девушку из
was
деревни
taken
взяли и
there and
продали
sold
туда
there
за
for a lot
кучу
of gold
золота
or
и
silver.
серебра.
Next,
Дальше
lina,
зерновые,
grain. Then
дальше
cereals,
зерновые,
hemp.
конопля.
Cannabis
Конопля
is
не
not
та
that narcotic
наркотическая
cannabis, it
конопля,
is an
это
industrial
промышленный
product.
продукт.
In
На самом
fact,
деле есть
there are
сорта
varieties
конопли,
of
которые
cannabis
никакого
that have
отношения к
nothing to
наркотикам не
do with
имеют.
drugs,
Но
but
для
for
нас
us,
это было чуть ли не
it was
первая,
almost
если не
the first,
вторая,
if not the
первая и
second,
вторая
first or
статья
second export
экспорта.
item. Why
Почему
hemp is a
конопля
raw
это сырье
material
для
for the
производства
production of a
огромного
huge number
количества
of
продуктов
secondary
вторичных.
products. And
Ну и,
finally,
наконец,
oil
нефть и
and
газ.
gas
Это
the
70-х
70s
годов
became the main raw
стало основным
material.
сырьем.
My
Мой
forecast
прогноз,
is
что
that
в
in the near
ближайшее время,
future,
если мы не
if we do not
перестанем,
stop
так сказать,
relying only on oil and gas
стоять
and do
только
not
на
switch
нефти и
to the
газу
next
и не
resource,
перейдем на
and
следующий
the next
ресурс, а
resource is
следующий ресурс
creative
это
developments.
творческие разработки,
In other
то
words,
есть
my
моя
idea is that Russia has a fairly high creative potential. If we create new technologies and supply them to the whole world, it will be like our technological raw materials, but of a completely different kind. It will not be dug out of the ground. It will not be collected in the forest. I see, right? It won't.
Это не будет нашими,
It will
это
be
будет
our
нашими
brains,
мозгами,
our
нашим
intelligence,
интеллектом,
our
нашим
creative
творческим
product that we will give to the
продуктом, который мы
whole
будем
world
давать всему
and
миру,
do
за
to
счет этого
this.
мы будем
We will
получать
receive cheap
дешевые
goods from
товары из
China
Китая
or Swiss precision
или
watches.
швейцарские часы
Here,
высокоточные.
well, we
Вот.
have
Ну, вот этот
considered this
вопрос
issue.
мы
Now the
рассмотрели.
next
Теперь
relay race
следующий,
of
эстафета
civilization.
цивилизации. То
In
есть
other
мы
words,
рассмотрели
we have seen a collision,
столкновение,
a symbiosis.
симбиоз.
And what
А
is
что
the
такое
relay
эстафета
race of
цивилизации?
civilization? This graph,
Вот на этом
I have
графике, я
already
уже
given it,
приводил,
shows that
показано,
every
что каждая
civilization is
цивилизация
born with a
рождается
period
в
of
период
500
500
years,
лет,
reaches its
достигает своего
maximum, creates a
максимума,
world
создает
science,
мировую
a world
науку,
level of
мировой уровень
technology, then
технологий,
it dies,
потом
goes into
она
oblivion,
умирает,
remains in the
уходит в
form of some
небытие,
kind of
остается в
people,
виде
which
какого-то
does not
там народа,
manifest
который
itself
ничем
in
себе
any
не
way.
проявляет.
The next
Приходит
civilization
следующая
comes,
цивилизация, она
it takes the
берет
achievements
достижения
of the previous
предыдущей цивилизации,
civilization,
на базе этих
creates
достижений
its own
создает свои
achievements on the basis
достижения.
of
И
these
так далее. То есть
achievements,
каждая
and so on.
цивилизация,
That is,
она
each civilization, it is based on the achievements of other civilizations.
Вот
Here
маленький
is a
пример.
small example.
Что
What
нам
the
дали
four
4
great river
великих вечных
civilizations have
цивилизации?
given
Чтобы было
us,
понятно,
to make it
каждая из них
clear,
дала
each of them
миру
has undoubtedly given the world
несомненно
great
большие
achievements.
достижения.
Egypt
Египет
gave
дал
geometry,
геометрию,
geodesy,
геодезию,
metallurgy,
металлургию,
astronomy,
астрономию,
accounting,
бухгалтерский учет,
writing,
письмо,
paper,
бумагу,
medicine,
медицину,
levers, plows,
рычаги,
and mills.
плуги и мельницы.
This is
Это
only a
только
tiny
крошечная
part of the
часть
list that
перечня, который
Egypt
дал
has given to
Египет
the
миру.
world. Mesopotamia
Междуречье,
is the
самая
most
мощная
powerful
астрономия,
astronomy, astrology,
астрология,
the hexadecimal
шестизначная
number
система
system of
счастливых на
360
360
degrees,
Первая
the
карта
first map of
Земли и
the earth
неба,
and sky,
жернова, он же
millstones,
глина.
clay firing. India, partial number system, algebra, metallurgy, bullet I told, trigonometry. The great religious system with the theory of transmigration of souls and cosmogony. This is just a short extract from what India has given to the world. And we use it. We use geodesy. We use 360 degrees. We use trigonometry, algebra. We use the achievements of previous civilizations as our own. China, compass, silk, gunpowder, cannons, rockets, paper. Deductive system of the world, evenly tempered musical system of 12 semitones. The theory of administrative management Confucius. I was surprised, by the way, to find out that our gamma here is do-re-mi beans axes and doodays and all that sort of thing. This is 12 semitones. This division from 2-2 to doubling by 12 semitones was created back in the 16th, early 16th century by some Chinese prince. He spent 30 years, in my opinion, creating the system, then proved it, and slowly, it leaked into Europe, and was adopted quite recently in Europe. In other words, Europe has nothing to do with this invention. It has adopted it from China. Europe has adopted silk, gunpowder, cannons, rockets from China. That's it. But now Europe is saying, no, we invented it all ourselves. We have the only civilization here that has created everything. Before that, there were some bastard civilizations. Well, you know what megalomania is, right? And what's next? Here we come to the Toffler scheme again. These are the agrarian stage, the industrial stage, the information revolution, the third wave, the industrial society, and the transition to the information society. And here I want to say once again that each civilization passes on its achievements to previous civilizations, in order for the next civilization to raise the whole of humanity a step higher just for this. In other words, if we say that Russia is the next civilization, for me this is an immutable fact, the result of my research. Then we must take all the achievements of the whole world, including Western civilization, and, based on these achievements, take the next step. And since every next step always raises humanity a step higher in all respects, then we will raise the whole world a step higher, inevitably. If not Russia, then someone else will come. I don't know, it will come down, maybe the aliens will lift it, I don't know. So far, apart from Russia, I don't see any other options for lifting. And then Russia, here it is, the star of Russia will light up in the firmament. And Russia, not in spite of, but will help the whole world to become better, richer, more harmonious. Well, one more question, also very interesting, is also from the interaction of civilization. This is the pendulum of the East-West-East civilization. I followed it up. It turned out to be an amazing thing. The development began, let's say, there in Egypt and Mesopotamia. Then it smoothly moved to antiquity, then smoothly moved to India, China, then through the Arabs it returned back to the West, to Western civilization. Now we all see that the pendulum of activity is moving to the East. In other words, there is a pendulum that oscillates west-east. That is, the west leads, then the east leads. Moreover, as time accelerates, the periods of these fluctuations become shorter and shorter. If thousands of years have passed between, let's say, the dominance of the West and the transition to India, China, then the transition has already been hundreds of years there, and here it may be even faster. That is, we don't know. But there is such a pendulum. At the same time, the middle axis of this pendulum, the center of equilibrium, are just the middle types of civilizations, to which I refer antiquity, the Arabs and Russia. Well, our position of the middle between the West and the East is not discussed. It is already clear. So that's it. In other words, this should also be considered. That is, now the pendulum has gone in the other direction, from the West to the East. Here is the general plan for building a unified, harmonious humanity. Here I have compiled some scheme, which I assume has something to do with real reality, at least in some way. Why? Because if Egypt and Mesopotamia formed one and inherited antiquity, antiquity passed everything to Europe and Western civilization. Then the Chinese and Indian civilization have not yet created their own antiquity. They have not united their culture, and there is no such thing yet. But I think that sooner or later it will happen, and then it should all come together into a single cultural idea of the world. The same scheme, only in more detail, There is a very powerful forecast for the future here. For this reason, if we have time vertically, that is, the past is at the bottom, the future is at the top. And here we have West-East, West, Middle East, that is, everything fluctuates like this. That is, it began in the West, then in the East, and most likely it began not in the West, not in the East, but it began right in the middle, in the center. And, in my opinion, this is the mysterious disappeared civilization of Balochistan. Balochistan is the most incomprehensible civilization, the least explored. Karapa has been explored much better. Bilgestan is unclear how, excavations have just begun there. I think that Bilgestan was the starting point. Then it passed to Egypt, Mesopotamia, united in antiquity, was inherited by Western civilization. The right branch went from here to India and China via Harappa. But this map, from my point of view, is some kind of scheme, very conditional, which needs to be analyzed and checked. We have already said that we are going, or rather, Kolsev is going. I think I inspired him with this idea. He's going to back it all up with some haplogroup research. If it works out, then God forbid. But what is it about? The point is that in the future, humanity must become one anyway, and we have only two options for unity. One is a dead unity. It is a concentration camp. It is a totalitarian system under the rule of the richest people in the world, which does not develop, and, due to the fact that it does not develop, becomes a closed system, in which there is only one option over time, due to the second beginning of the term dynamics, to degenerate and die. If Schwab's Western plan wins, it will be a victory of death over life. It must be clearly understood. And the death of all mankind in the end. And the second option that we are promoting is a variant of a harmonious whole of humanity, in which each of the cultures, each of the civilizations will represent a certain functional subsystem of a single harmonious humanity. As an example, we say we have an organism in which there are 12 functional subsystems. Heart, liver, kidneys, brain, central nervous system, and so on. All 12 subsystems, all work in harmonious unity. Neither of them crushes the other. Because if it wins, let's say there's a stomach over the heart, liver, and brain. But it happens sometimes, right? Sometimes you look at a person, they're with such a belly, there are no brains, no heart, no feelings, there is nothing. But this is an ugliness, you must agree. In fact, it's good when a slim person, whose digestion works, the reproductive system works, the brain works. Movement is normal, so to speak, the liver, kidneys, everything copes. In other words, it is impossible for any of the subsystems to dominate in a complex, harmonious, integral humanity. In the same way, from my point of view, it is impossible to remove any of the subsystems. No civilization can be removed from this future unified harmonious humanity. Any subsystem from our body, if we remove a person's skin, for example, cut out the liver, for example, cut off his heart, for example, and so on, and so on, and so on, this is the death of the whole organism. It's the same with humanity. Any of the civilizations that exist now cannot be destroyed. You just can't. Why? Because this is the destruction of some of the subsystems. People who don't understand this, they live for today with some simple functionals and arithmetic. These are accountants who don't understand how complicated the world is. But I hope that besides us, there are many very reasonable people, including in the West. Let's not point the finger there, right? Who, after all, will understand this and will not let us ruin it? In the West with a finger. Here. But I've practically finished everything. Waiting for questions. Thank you for your attention. Thank you very much. It's all so uplifting. There should always be at the end, entered, in a bright future, but I have bit. We will cut out this piece, yes.
All right. So, Sergey Ivanovich, you have the first word. Your presentation is here.
Yes. Well, I want to say right away that this topic, which I have been considering for a long time, is set out in much more detail. In more detail and more reasoned in many of my notes. In this case, we will literally run through the tops of this concept to designate a certain position, and we will consider it in detail later. So, two variants of a single future of humanity. Here you see, our hero is standing at the fork. To begin with, the world has entered a system of systemic crises. The crisis of energy, environmental, overpopulation, crisis of the management system, crisis of purpose, crisis of meaning, crisis of worldviews. All these crises can be enumerated endlessly. It says that the world has come to a line beyond which it cannot continue to exist in the second form, and it is necessary to look for a way out. Here, but the way out is according to Sergey Yuryevich, to whom I join, he will be the whole 21st century, will be devoted to this passage through these crises. So, this is the first stage, Western centrism. What we see now is increasing or decreasing. Then there will be global chaos. Here he is now in his 20th year, starting with, so to speak, this pandemic. I am now the conflict in Ukraine is growing. By the 30th year, according to Sergey Yuryevich, it will reach a peak. Now, but in the 40th year, the trend will be reversed, and the third stage will begin. This is the emergence and interaction of civilizational blocks. In other words, such regionalization will begin. Some call it globalization, whatever you want to call it. In other words, what is it about? That there will be some local territories that will even have their own currency, and each territory will live its own life, in order, so to speak, to survive in these conditions quite independently. And at the end of our century, after the 70th year, not just the interaction of these civilizational blocks will begin, but an attempt to create some kind of unified humanity, but another one, not the one that was created at the end of the previous century. Here, but there are two ways out of the crisis. I want to say right away, the option that is depicted here, in the form of falling people, so to speak, is a crisis, a way out of the crisis, which is possible, and it is being considered by the globalists. We are talking about the fact that the population has reached a peak, after which there will be a collapse, and this fall of people symbolizes a rather serious catastrophe. And the option that we are considering, the best option, is an innovative leap. That is, when humanity rises in its understanding of the world and its technological capabilities to a new level. And this will solve all problems. Now it's like this is why, generally speaking, we are on the verge of a crisis. What is it about? Now, a little bit of analysis. On the threshold of the last assembly of humanity. Here we have a pyramid depicted here, which shows that humanity has some hierarchical levels. The smallest
Самая
social
маленькая
unit
социальная
is a
ячейка —
family,
это семья,
then a
потом
community
община
or a
или
working
коллектив
collective,
рабочий, потом
then
племена,
tribes, nationalities,
народности,
peoples,
народы,
states,
государства,
civilizations, and,
цивилизации и,
finally,
наконец,
humanity.
человечество.
And the
И
whole
вся
history
история
of human
человеческой цивилизации
civilization
показывает,
shows
что
that
вот как
just as
вот
this
эта детская
children's
пирамидка
pyramid was
собиралась, так и
assembled,
человечество
so humanity
собирается
is gradually going from level to
постепенно
level,
с уровня на
rising
уровень,
higher and
поднимаясь все
higher,
выше и выше,
the
конечной
ultimate
цели
goal of
объединения всего
uniting all of
человечества
humanity
в единое
as a single
целое.
whole. This is the
Вот.
beginning of
Начало
social
социального
construction.
строительства — это вот
These are
такие
communities
общины,
like
они до
this.
сих пор
They still
живут, это
live. These are
фотографии, это
photos. This
рисунок,
is
это
not a
то, что,
drawing. This is
по-моему,
what, in my
в
opinion,
Австралии аборигены.
Aborigines are in Australia.
Вот. Но
But then
потом постепенно,
gradually,
так
these
сказать, эти вот
communities united
общины обменялись
tribes,
племена,
tribes of the
племена в
union of
союзы
tribes.
племен,
Then
потом
there were
появились
nationalities,
народности, народы,
peoples,
нации,
nations, states.
государства.
And
И вот
now
сейчас
we
уже
are
мы
already
стоим
on
на
the
пороге
threshold of
объединения, то есть
unification.
это
That
процесс
is, this process is
неуклонно
steadily
идет,
going on.
он не
It does
зависит от
not
наших
depend on our
хотелок.
wishes.
Вот.
Here,
Но
but
что
what is
очень
very
важно
important
отметить,
to
что
note
каждый
is that
переход
each transition
происходит
takes
за
place at
счет,
the
к
expense,
сожалению,
unfortunately,
путем
of very
очень
serious
серьезных
military conflicts, bloody
военных
showdowns.
конфликтов, кровавых разборок.
Tribes, for
Племена,
example,
например,
they
они
just
просто
united
вот не
nationalities
просто
for
так
a reason.
объединились народности.
It
Это
was a
был
period,
период, сейчас
let's
не
not
будем
go into history
углубляться в
now,
историю,
when they
когда
were
они
at war
воевали
with
друг с
each
другом.
other. Let's
Вот.
touch a little
Коснемся
bit on the
немножечко вот
unification of states.
объединения государств.
But now
Мы
we
сейчас
see
видим
Europe
Европу
united,
объединенную, но
but
помним
we
уже
remember quite recent
недавние совершенно
stories in the
истории в
20th
20 веке,
century.
когда
When the
война
war
шла
was on the
на территории
territory of
Европы,
Europe, states with
государств
each
друг с
other,
другом. А до
and
этого, так
before
сказать,
that
Европа
Europe fought
воевала
an endless number of times
нескончаемое
with each
количество
other.
раз друг с
The
другом.
states were at
Государства
war
воевали
Spain,
Испания,
England,
Англия, Франция и
France, and
прочее.
so on. The wars went
Войны
on
шли
without
не
stopping.
прекращаясь. Сейчас
Now
они
they have
объединились,
finally
наконец-то,
united,
и сейчас
and now
государств
there is
уже там
practically no
практически
state
нет, там
there.
есть единое
There is a single
европейское
European
пространство,
space, Western
западная
civilization.
цивилизация.
Here,
Вот. То
it was
самое
the
было
same
в
in
свое
Egypt
время
at
в
one
Египте,
time,
когда
when the so-called nomes of this
образовались так
area were
называемые
formed.
номы этой области,
They
они
gradually
постепенно
grew,
росли, потом они
then they
доросли
grew
до
to
того,
the
что стали
point
воевать
that
друг
they
с другом,
began
и
to fight
после
with each
кровавых
other,
разборок
and after a bloody
единая, так
showdown,
сказать,
a single
цивилизация
civilization
и
and the Egyptian state
государство
emerged.
египетское.
It was the
То
same in
самое было и в
China.
Китае,
Everyone
хорошо
knows the history
известно,
of
тоже
5 or
5 или
6
6
kingdoms.
царств, я не помню,
I
которые
don't
были
remember
объединены
which were united by the iron hand of
железной
the
рукой
emperor of the first
императора первого
Chinese, but it
китайского, но
was
это
not
тоже
easy
было
either.
непросто.
This
Объединение
association
шло
went
через
through a
очень
very big
большие
bloody showdown.
разборки
And
кровавые.
now we are
И вот
finally
сейчас мы
standing at the
стоим,
level of
наконец, на уровне
civilizations.
цивилизации.
We
У нас
have
там,
there,
по
according
мнению
to
Хантингтона,
Huntington, there are
есть
several
несколько
civilizations
цивилизаций,
that will
которые
now
будут
sort
сейчас
things
выяснять
out
отношения, выяснять
militarily,
военным путем до
until
тех
they
пор, пока
find
не
out
выяснят
and
и не
unite into
объединятся
a
в
single
единое человечество.
humanity. So to
Вот,
say,
так сказать, в
at present we
настоящее
are on the
время мы
threshold of
стоим на пороге
unification into a
объединения в
single
единое
humanity.
человечество, и
And this
это
unification,
объединение, к
unfortunately,
сожалению,
is
к
huge
огромному,
to
к
my
моему личному,
personal.
не думайте, что
Don't
я
think that I welcome
вот
this
эту
trend
тенденцию
inside of me.
приветствую внутри
No.
себя, нет.
But it
Но
must be
надо
stated,
констатировать,
my
мы ученые, мы
scientists,
просто
we just study the
изучаем
processes and
процессы
state the
и
fact.
констатируем факт.
This
Это
unification
объединение
of
цивилизаций
civilization
пройдет
will
по
not be easy
Хантингтону
for Huntington.
не
It will be
просто.
a showdown.
Это будут разборки.
This
Вот
is what the
как
world
выглядит
looks like
мир с
from
точки зрения
Huntington's point of view.
Хантингтона.
This
Это вот
Western
западная
civilization
цивилизация,
is blue,
синяя,
or
голубая, наша
Russian, so
российская,
to
так сказать,
speak,
арабская
Arab,
такая
white cell, red.
белоклеточная,
This is
красная
China.
это
There is
Китай,
India
тут где-то
somewhere
есть
here.
Индия.
Here, these
Вот,
are
вот
the
это
civilizations
те
that almost
цивилизации,
all
которые
political
выделяют сейчас
scientists
практически
distinguish
все
now.
политологи.
Who is
Кто такой
Huntington?
Хантингтон?
He is
Это
the
президент
president of the American
Американской
Political
ассоциации
Science
политических
Association.
наук. В
In the
70-е годы он
70s,
выпустил
he
книгу
published the book The
«Столкновение
Clash of
цивилизаций»,
Civilizations, and he
и он
writes,
пишет:
the clash of
«Столкновение
civilizations will
цивилизаций
become the
станет
dominant
доминирующим
factor in
фактором
world
мировой
politics.
политики. Линия
The fault
разлома
line
между
between
цивилизациями —
civilizations
это и
is the
есть
lines
линии
of future
будущих
fronts.
фронтов».
He wrote
Он
this in
написал
the
это в
70s,
70-е
when
годы,
the world was
когда мир был
calm, when the
спокоен,
war
когда
was
война была,
seemingly
казалось бы,
overcome
навсегда
forever.
преодолена.
Many
На него
traditional
обрушились
historians attacked
критики
him
очень
with
многие
criticism,
историки
but it
традиционные,
turned out that
но
he was
оказалось, что он
right.
прав. И сейчас его
And now
теория,
his
вот эта,
theory,
она
this is it,
является
is some
некоторым
kind
таким
of prototype of the
прообразом
future
будущего
understanding.
понимания.
Here,
Вот.
but
Но
we
мы
believe
считаем,
that
что
the
мир
world
на
will
самом деле
actually
будет
develop in two
развиваться
ways. That is, on the
двояко. То
one
есть мир,
hand,
с одной стороны,
the
будет по
world will
западному
follow the Western
сценарию,
scenario
через
through the
глобальный
global
кризис
crisis
идти к
to the
западному
Western
варианту.
option.
Это вот нижняя
This is
часть
the lower
нашего
part of our
графика.
schedule, a
Единое
single single and faceless human mass, led by some such all-seeing eye, digitalization, and so on. But we see another option at the same time. This is a new story. We will raise a harmonious humanity to the next level of development in which all cultures will interact on the principle of complementarities. But before we understand why we need all this, we need to understand the distant task, the perspective of cosmic humanity. The fact is that humanity is now climbing out of the Earth like dough. These are the white dots around the planet. These are the satellites and stations that have already been released into orbit. And they are being thrown out more and more. In other words, we are going into space. It is obvious. And from my point of view, the future will be a planetary space civilization that will unite, of course, the whole world. Because if we do not make a harmonious future, we will
Нам
not
этого не
see this
видать,
future, but such
будущего,
a
но
planet.
такая
An
планетарная
amber
космическая
space
цивилизация
civilization,
как бы
as it
нас
were,
ждет
awaits us
впереди,
ahead.
и в этом
And
есть
this
великий
makes
смысл,
great
потому что
sense,
человечество
because
рождено
humanity was born
для,
not
не
to
для
live
того,
on
чтобы
Earth
жить на Земле
forever,
вечно, а для
but
того,
to go
чтобы
out
выйти
into
во
the
Вселенную.
universe. Many of
Об
our
этом говорили многие
cosmologists have
наши
talked about
космисты.
this. I can
Я
justify
могу
it,
это
but I won't
обосновывать, но
do it
сейчас не буду
now.
этого
I
делать.
believe
Считаю,
that I
что
have
это и так
already said
достаточно
quite a
много
lot
на,
on this
на тему
topic.
сказано.
So the
Вот.
task of
И
creating a
возникает
new
задача
worldview
создания
arises.
нового мировоззрения.
And it
Причем она
occurs.
возникает
Curiously, it is possible to
любопытно, можно
compare, so to
сопоставить, так
speak,
сказать,
the two
две
tasks that were
задачи,
set
которые
before
поставлены
humanity
были
in the
перед
Old
человечеством в
Testament
Ветхом Завете и
and the
Новом
New
Завете.
Testament. A
Очень
very
интересный
interesting
момент,
point.
мало кто
Few
знает, что в
people
Новом
know that in
Завете
the New Testament
есть
there is an epistle
послание
of the Apostle
апостола
Paul.
Павла,
Whether
то ли
Renfin
Коринфянам, то
Anatoly
ли
to the
Римлянам, я не
Romans,
помню, в
I
котором
do
он
not
говорит,
remember, in which he says,
Ветхий
the
Завет
Old
был
Testament was
заключен Богом
concluded
с
by
людьми,
God with
когда они
people
были
when they
как
were like
маленькие
little
дети,
children.
мало что
They understood
понимали.
little. It's time to
Пришло
make a
время
new
заключить
covenant
с
with
ними
them.
Новый Завет.
They have become more
Они
intelligent
стали более
people,
разумными
and
людьми.
God has given
И
new
Бог дал новые
installations.
установки.
Therefore,
Поэтому
the Old
Ветхий
Testament
Завет
is
потому
called old
называется
because it
ветхим,
has
что он
become
обветшал.
dilapidated.
Я своими словами
But I am now
пересказываю сейчас
retelling in my
некоторые,
own
так сказать,
words some
тезисы
of Paul's
Павла.
thesis.
Так вот, что
So, the
главное в
main
Ветхом
thing in the Old
Завете была
Testament
задача,
was the
поставленная
task
Богом
set by
перед
God
человеком,
before man,
перед
before
человечеством.
humanity.
Я
I quote from
цитату из
Genesis,
Бытия.
and God blessed
«И
them,
благословил
and
их
God
Бог,
said to
сказал
them,
им Бог,
Be
плодитесь
fruitful
и
and multiply,
размножайтесь, и
and fill the
наполняйте
earth.
землю».
Well, we
Ну,
can
мы можем
safely say
смело
that
сказать,
Comrade
что
God has
товарищ
fulfilled
Бог
the party task.
партийное задание
We have
выполнил, мы
multiplied and
расплодились и
multiplied. We
размножились,
have filled the
землю
earth.
заполнили.
What to
Что
do
делать
next?
дальше?
Well,
Ну,
and then there is
а
also an
дальше это
answer
тоже
in the
ответ
New
есть в Новом
Testament.
Завете.
Seek first the
Ищите же
kingdom
прежде
of God
Царствие
and his
Божие и
righteousness,
правды Его,
and all
и
these
все
things
это
will be added to
приложится
you.
вам.
Matthew
Матфей
6:33.
6:33.
That is,
То
we
есть
have filled in, and
мы
then our task
заполнили,
is to
а
seek the
дальше наша
kingdom of
задача
God
искать
and his
Царство
truth.
Божие
In
и
other
правду
words,
Его. То
this
есть
is
это
spiritual life
духовная
and
жизнь
going into
и
space,
выход в
from my
космос, с моей
point of
точки
view.
зрения.
It is
Надо
necessary to
менять
change the
мировоззрение,
worldview
абсолютно точно,
absolutely
потому что даже
precisely.
евразийское
Because
мировоззрение
even the
это
Eurasian
такое
worldview
старое
is such
мировоззрение,
an old
которое
worldview
основано
that is
на
based on the
противостоянии
confrontation
суши
of
и
land
моря.
and sea, a
Западное
Western
мировоззрение,
worldview
которое пытается
that
объединить
tries to
всех
unite
на базе
everyone
своих
on the
западных
basis of its
ценностей.
Western values, a
Материалистическое
materialistic worldview.
мировоззрение, с моей
From
точки
my point of
зрения,
view,
оно
it has
также
also become
обветшало, как в
dilapidated, as in the
Ветхом
New Old
Завете.
Testament.
Вот эта
This
цель.
is the goal.
Нам нужно
We need
развивать
to develop a
космическое
cosmic
атмосферное
atmospheric
мировоззрение.
worldview. When a
Когда
person will
человек
think
будет
on the
мыслить
scale of the
масштабами
universe,
Вселенной.
and
И
then we will
тогда мы
finally rise
наконец-то от
from the cyborg
киборга
hominid service
гоминида
to a
служебного
creative
поднимемся
person
к
who will
к
explore
человеку
space,
творческому,
as
который
depicted
вот
here
будет
on the
осваивать
tree,
космос,
with the help of
как
intelligence,
вот
creativity,
тут на дереве
and going into
изображено,
space.
с помощью интеллекта, вот, творчества и выхода в космос. Да?
And
И
then we
тогда
will
мы
be able
сможем
to
предложить
offer our
нашу
planet,
планету, нашу
our civilization to
цивилизацию
the space
космическому
community,
сообществу.
and they will pass on the
Они нам
baton to
передадут
us,
по эстафете
which we
дела,
will do
которые мы
already in
будем
alliance with
делать уже в
space
союзе с
civilizations.
космическими цивилизациями.
Well,
Ну, вот
that's
как бы вот
how I would
такой
give such a
прообраз
prototype
я
of
дал
such a
того
distant
далекого
future of humanity.
будущего человечества.
It is
Понятно,
clear that
что
with such a
при
goal,
такой
no
цели
Swabian option will pull for
никакой
this goal.
швабовский вариант не
It is
потянет
clear that the
на эту
Swabian
цель.
version will
Ясно,
drag
что
us like a
швабовский
stone
вариант
to
нас
the
как
bottom,
камень на
and
дно
we will
потащит,
sink,
и мы
and we will
потонем, и мы
perish.
погибнем.
Therefore, it is necessary
Поэтому
to
надо
offer
что-то
something
другое
else.
предлагать.
And what
А
else
что
can you
можно другое
offer?
предложить? Ну,
Well,
тут
here's a little bit of
немножечко, так
systemology,
сказать,
so to speak.
системологии. Вот.
There are only two
Существует
orders in the
только два
universe,
порядка
two
во
ways out of
Вселенной.
chaos. I
Два
declare
выхода
this
из хаоса.
responsibly.
Это
I
я
have
ответственно
investigated
заявляю,
this
этот
issue.
вопрос исследовал.
This is the order of
Это
symmetry,
порядок
the
симметрии
order
и
of the
порядок
hormone.
гармонии.
Here
Вот
on the
тут
right
на
picture,
правой
we see
картинке
how
мы видим,
symmetry
чем
differs from
отличается
harmony.
симметрия от гармонии.
Symmetry
Симметрия –
is the
это
regular laying of bricks in the
регулярная
Kremlin wall
укладка
in
кирпичей
particular,
в Кремлевской
and
стене
harmony
в
is
частности.
Saint,
А
Basil's
гармония – это
Cathedral.
собор Василия
There is
Блаженного.
nothing the
Тут
same
нет
here,
ничего
but everything is
одинакового, но все
harmonious and
гармонично и
beautiful.
красиво.
Let's see the
То же
same
самое
thing.
посмотрим. Вот
Here is a
сгоревший
burnt
лес,
forest.
его можно
It can be
засадить,
planted
как
here as it
засадили
was
здесь
planted here symmetrically,
симметрично,
so
так
to
сказать,
speak.
деревьями, да,
With
но если он
trees,
сам
yes, but if
вырастет,
it
то
grows by
будет
itself,
красивый
it will
гармоничный
be a
бор.
beautiful harmonious forest.
То есть существует
That
два вида
is, there
порядка.
are two kinds of order.
Они
They counteract chaos.
противодействуют хаосу.
The way
Выход из
out of
хаоса
chaos
происходит
occurs only in the direction of either regular symmetry or in the direction of harmonious order. There are no other options. Then there are three states: chaos, symmetry, and harmony. I want to say that this is the option that Schwab offers. This is the very symmetry as a forced measure. Perhaps it will be implemented. And what we want to offer is some kind of prototype of St. Basil's Cathedral, that is, from my point of view, the most harmonious building in the world created in the entire history of mankind. And then the question arises how to move from the totalitarian option to the Schwab, to the harmonious option that we are considering. Well, once again, one more theoretical digression. What is a single harmonious humanity? Here you see some picture from Leviathan. This is a book by Thomas Hobbes' Leviathan, which was published at one time, in my opinion, in the 17th century. Sergei Yurievich will correct me if I am wrong. Then it was banned, it was burned. Why? Because it gave such a vision, which was very unusual for Europe at that time. The essence of this view of the world was as follows: that society and the state are not the sum of people, but that the state has its own kind of life, and that it is a living organism that lives by its own laws. And we, as cells of this living organism, adapt or do not adapt to the life of this organism. If we don't adjust, then our body throws us outside of its own, abroad, and if we adjust, then we work inside this life, this organism. But Thomas Hobbes is the middle, so to speak, of the historical ideological development. In fact, the ideas there go back to Plato, Aristotle. Hegel also wrote about it later, and our geopoliticians talked about it a lot. This is such a concept of the organizational development of the state, that is, the state as an organism. Civilization as organisms too. Speng wrote about it, Gumilev wrote about it. Many other geopolitics and civilizationists write about it. In other words, here is an approach such as to the body. It opens up new possibilities for analysis. Why? Because our organism, if we look at our organism, each organism has its own 12 systems. Now, every organism has a central nervous system, respiratory systems, circulatory systems, and so on, an immune system. These 12 systems are an axiom of physiology. In other words, no one even doubts that such systems exist. Each system works on the body as a whole, each performs its function. And if at least one of these systems ceases to perform its functions, the body will die. And on the other hand, if one system decides that it is the main one and begins to suppress the work of other systems, the body will also die. I see, right? That's the balance here. Balance, harmony of the 12 systems. All systems are different. This is what they look like inside the body. This picture is colorful. Yes, 7 systems are shown here. The musculoskeletal system, there is a nervous, digestive, lymphatic, and other skin system. This can be studied indefinitely, but here I tried to create some table of correspondence between the systems of functions in the body and functions in the state. It's really very simple here. Here is the function of the problem of nutrition and resources as it is solved in the body. It is not the respiratory system that is overshadowed, but the extraction of all resources and their consumption in the state. The function of protection against external threats at the macro level is the army. Teeth, fangs, horns, hooves. Protection from external danger at the micro level. We have a customs border guard. There is skin in the body. The control center, the supreme legislative power. There is a central nervous system in the body. Executive power. Well, here the executive power in the state, in the body, the peripheral nervous system. Protection from internal danger. Counterintelligence is alien. The FSB is its own degenerates. The Ministry of Internal Affairs is parasites. The immune system in the body, and so on. In other words, it is possible to compare here indefinitely. In fact, there is no 100% similarity to this one, because after all, they live, develop, and the organism has already completed its evolution. Well, there are some differences here, but in general the idea is clear. Any social organism, it must somehow have some functions, and a set of these functions is mandatory. If at least one of these functions is destroyed in the state, well, let's say the immune system, yes, that is, there will be no ideological protection, it will not work, then the state will simply decompose, which we have observed many times in the entire history of human civilization, what we have observed over the past 30 years in Russia, and so on. This topic is separate, I will not dwell on it. In other words, what does this mean? I'm going back to this schedule. From my point of view, since the 70s, the development of Western civilization has slowed down, stopped, and went down. That is now what I see, for example, in the internet space, in scientific terms. This is such profanation. This is such dilettantism. This is, so to speak, a crude, fake presentation of scientific things. That is, even scientific thought is being degraded, from my point of view, in Western civilization. I'm not
А уж я
talking
не говорю
about
о
what
том,
they
что они
want to
хотят
do with
сделать
the
со всем
whole
миром.
world.
Ну,
But I
я еще
repeat
раз повторю,
again,
нам
we
не дано
can't predict,
предугадать.
and first of
И,
all, and
во-первых, а во-вторых,
secondly,
мы не знаем, что
we
мы
don't know
сможем
what we
сделать,
can
что мы не
do,
сможем.
what we can't
Но
do.
так или иначе,
But
я
anyway,
считаю,
I
что
think
вот
that's it
все-таки
after all. A
новая
new
история
history is
нужна.
needed.
И эта
And
новая
this
история
new
должна
history
привести нас
should
к
lead us to an
альтернативе,
alternative,
к
to a
гармоничному
harmonious
человечеству.
humanity. And how will this
А
happen?
как это будет
Here such
происходить? Вот здесь
images are
такие образы
given.
даны.
A
Росток
sprout of the
будущего, единое
future, a
гармоничное
single
человечество.
harmonious
В
humanity.
настоящее время
At
вот это
present,
гармоничное
this is the
человечество
harmonious
будущего, оно
humanity of the
выглядит как
future.
вот росток на
It
фоне
looks
вот
like a
засохшей
sprout
земли
against the
и
background of a dried
мегаполиса,
up
или
earth
как вот
and a
после
megalopolis.
всемирного
Or like
потопа
this
на
tree
пеньке
grows like an
старом
old
у
rot
него
on a stump
вырастает
after
это
the
дерево.
flood. Here's another
Вот. И
question.
еще
How
один
did it
вопрос.
all
Как
really
это все на
happen
самом
in the
деле
previous
происходило
era?
в предыдущей эпохе?
Here is the
Тут
tree of
древо социума.
society. So,
Значит,
it is absolutely
совершенно
certain
точно
that humanity developed in
человечество
exactly the
развивалось
same way as the Christmas
точно
tree.
так же подобно, как
How does the
елка.
Christmas tree grow?
Как растет
A
елка?
sprout
Появляется
appears.
росток,
Then this sprout turns into a
потом этот
tear.
росток
A new
превращается в
sprout
ярус,
appears.
появляется новый
A new
росток.
tear appears.
Появляется новый ярус. И
So,
так
the tree is
елка
built tier by
выстраивается
tier
ярус за ярусом,
until it
пока
reaches the
достигает
maximum
предельного
number of
количества
tiers
ярусов,
allowed by
допустимого
biological
биологическими
laws,
законами,
after
после чего
which the
елка
tree withers
засыхает
and
и
dies. The
гибнет.
same thing happened to
То же
humanity
самое
in social
происходило с
terms.
человечеством в
After
социальном
the
плане.
completion of the next stage,
После завершения
tiers of
очередного
stagnation
этапа
are
на нем
formed on it,
формируются
which
ярусы
live for
застоя,
many
которые
thousands
живут
of
многие
years
тысячи
without
лет без
changes.
изменений.
The growth
Рост
continues
продолжает
with
новые
new shoots.
побеги.
These
Вот
tiers
эти
of
вот ярусы
stagnation,
застоя,
it
это
is
надо
necessary to tell
специально, так сказать,
specifically how they
рассказывать, как
live.
они живут. Это
This is a
отдельная
separate
такая
funny
забавная
topic.
тема.
I'll
Я
only
вот
show
только
you
3
3 tiers
яруса
from.
вам тут покажу.
Here are the primitive
Вот
people
первобытные
below.
люди внизу,
Hunters
так сказать,
turned into
охотники
70,000
превратились
years
вот
ago in
70
Australia.
тысяч лет
This
назад
civilization of
в
hunters
Австралии
arose,
возникла
in
вот эта вот
quotation marks,
цивилизация
of a
охотников, в
civilization
кавычках,
that has not
цивилизация,
changed at all in
которая за 70 тысяч
70,000
лет
years.
вообще не поменялась.
That's how they
Как
lived
70 тысяч лет назад
70,000
жили,
years
так живут
ago,
сейчас.
just like now.
10
10,000
тысяч
years
лет назад
ago,
пастухи
shepherds in Africa,
так
in
сказать,
North
в
Africa,
Африке,
where there was
в
no
Северной
sugar,
Африке, где
but
не
there
было
were
Сахара,
savannas.
а были саванны,
They lived like in
они
the
вот жили
central
как
picture.
в центральной
This can be
картинке,
clearly
это
seen
видно
from the
хорошо
drawings
по
that remained in the cave.
рисункам, которые
Now
остались в
they live in
пещере. Сейчас
South
в Южном
Sudan in the
Судане
same
они
way.
точно так же живут.
And
За
for
10 тысяч
10,000
лет в
years in
Южном
South
Судане
Sudan,
жизнь
the
пастухов
life of
не
shepherds has not
поменялась
changed at all.
вообще.
The only
Единственное,
thing
что
that has
изменилось,
changed is that instead of
вместо копий,
spears,
так
so
сказать,
to
и
speak,
стрел
and
с
arrows with
луками, они
bows,
стали
they
использовать
began to use
автоматы
Kalashnikov
Калашникова.
assault
Я видел
rifles.
фильм,
I've
но
seen the
живут они
movie,
точно
but they
так же.
live the same way. Another
Еще
tier
один
of
ярус
stagnation
застоя –
is the
это
farmers,
земледельцы,
the peasants of Egypt.
крестьяне
When they came
Египта.
to the bank of the
Когда они
Nile,
пришли
they
на
began
берег
to
Нила,
grow
они стали
cereals
вот
like
так
this, so
выращивать,
to
так сказать,
speak. It's in the
злаковые,
pictures.
это на
And
картинках.
so far
И
they
до
are
сих
growing
пор
here.
они вот
Look at the
выращивают,
upper right
посмотрите правую
picture.
верхнюю
They are
картинку.
collecting
Точно
sickles in the
так же
same way.
собирают
I
серпами. Я сам,
myself,
когда ехал
when I
на
was
автобусе
driving by
мимо
bus
этих полей,
past these
видел, как
fields,
люди чуть ли
saw
не
how
на
people
коленях
almost on their knees reap
пожинали
these
вот эти
here,
вот
put them with me.
ставили. То
In
есть
other words,
ничего не
nothing has
изменилось.
changed. I
Я
want
хочу
to
сказать,
say
что
that I
таких
counted
ярусов
such
я
tiers,
насчитал,
but
порядка
about
10,
10, which
которые
may be
вот, может быть,
12,
12
even
даже
human
человеческой
civilization
цивилизации
froze and stopped developing.
замерли и перестали развиваться.
So,
Так
from
вот, с
my
моей точки
point of
зрения,
view,
западная
Western
цивилизация вплотную
civilization
подошла
has
к
come
тому, что
close
она
to the
прекратила
fact that
свое
it stopped
развитие.
its
В
development.
80-е годы
I
прошлого
say in the
столетия она
70s
прекратила
of the
свое
last
развитие. Она сейчас
century, it
формирует
stopped its
этот
development.
очередной
It
ярус.
is now forming this next
Может быть, зря я
tier.
его называю
Well,
застоем.
maybe I call it
Но это будет
stagnation for
новый
nothing,
ярус
but it will be a
очередного
new tier of the
горизонтального,
next horizontal
так
industrial
сказать,
tier.
индустриального яруса.
This will be the
Вот. Это
arc
будет
tier,
ковчег,
on which the
ярус,
ideal team will be
на
assembled
который будет
for the
собрана идеальная
lifestyle of the
команда
last
под стиль
industrial
жизни
era.
последней индустриальной
This is the
эпохи. Это
plan
и
of
есть
the
план
golden
золотого
billion.
миллиарда.
The task of the
Задача
creative
творческой
part of
части
humanity
человечества
is to
сформировать
form a
новый
new escape
побег
at the top
на
of the
вершине
tree of
древа
evolution.
эволюции.
Escape
Побег
is a
слово
complex
сложное,
word.
оно
It
имеет
has
два
two
смысла, в том
meanings,
числе побег
including
из
escape
старого
from the old
образа
way
жизни.
of life. Why?
Почему? Потому что
Because if
если
this is the only way it
вот
turns out,
так вот
if this
получится
tree,
только
so to
так,
speak,
если
finishes
вот
its growth
дерево,
and
так
a new
сказать,
elite
закончит свой
arises,
рост,
this is
и
the Western
возникнет новая
European
элита,
and the Western
вот
world,
это вот
then it will remain
западноевропейское
in
и
humanity.
западный мир,
Only
то
a billion will
в
survive.
человечестве
Because it
останется
will not
выживет
be
только
able to
миллиард,
live
потому что больше
harmoniously on
при
Earth with the
старой
old
сумме
sum of
технологий
technologies.
гармонично на Земле жить не сможет.
If there is
Если не
no
будет
green
этого
shoot,
зелененького
the
побега,
tree of
то
human civilization will stop
дерево
growing,
человеческой
and every
цивилизации
tree that
перестанет
stops
расти,
growing
а
in
всякое
biology,
дерево, которое
it
перестает
withers and
расти в
dies.
биологии, оно засыхает и
These are
умирает.
well-known
Это
things
известная
from
вещь из
biology.
биологии. Я думаю,
I
то же самое
think the same
произойдет и
thing will happen not only with humanity,
не только
but I
с
also counted
человечеством, но
even
и
with the
я
planet.
посчитал даже с
Then our
планетой.
planet will
Наша
cease if
планета
humanity
перестанет
develops,
развиваться
the
человечеству,
biosphere will
погибнет
also
и
die,
биосфера, и мы
and we will turn into a
превратимся
kind
в
of
подобие
Mars.
Марса.
Therefore, the only thing we can do now within the framework of Russian civilization, which, from my point of view, according to my calculations, is designed to carry out this escape from the old world and create a new worldview, a new culture, new amounts of technology. And all of this will take a century. Please don't relax. This is for children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren, and we will have to carry out all this work. Before we create a completely new way of life with new opportunities, what opportunities will there be? In a nutshell, it will be communication with the information field of the universe directly. It will be ethereal energy, harmonious technology, the sum of technologies. At the first stage, most likely there will be solar energy from orbit. Japan has 3 programs, in China and in the USA, the creation of solar energy. But it will be overcoming the problems that the old sum of technologies is now facing. Thank you for your attention. I'll finish.